lunchrooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Tuesday, January 17th, 2023. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, David Enrich, business investigations editor at the New York Times, author of Servants of the Damned, Giant Law Firms, Donald Trump, and the Corruption of Justice. Also on the program today, House Republicans plot to breach the debt limit. 40 dead and counting in Dnipro. Unconfirmed reports point to Russian missile. Meanwhile, a Wagner commander defects to Norway. Massive protest in Israel against Netanyahu's authoritarian judicial reforms. And a losing Republican candidate in New Mexico arrested for a series of shootings targeting Democratic officials. More documents found at the Biden home as the Republican prepares Benghazi 2. Medicare drug savings begin to kick in for seniors. Meanwhile, a record high number of Americans put off health care because of cost last year. Oklahoma kills its first of 11 people they plan to kill this year. China experiences its first population drop in 60 years. And Elon Musk in court facing a lawsuit over his lies about his plan to take Tesla private. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us at the beginning of the week. And this week it's on a Tuesday. Emma Vigeland, here we are. It's Tuesday.
Very
Everybody's
good Tuesday
healthy.
To you.
All good.
Yep.
What do you don't have a saying for this one, do you?
The Giants won over the weekend?
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
of course.
that's right.
It'd be a Newsday Tuesday.
It would be, but it's not a news day.
We should say Emma's not actually sitting in her chair. She's levitating.
You're right.
There's no chair, and she's just levitating.
And the news that we were in the Washington Post crossword puzzle. Like, that's pretty cool. I didn't see that until just now, right?
Yeah, it's on the sheet. Yeah, we'll
okay,
discuss.
great,
Yeah.
great. I was just looking
that's
over
a fun
that.
half. That's a fun half thing.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I had no
Spoilers.
idea.
Sorry.
No, it's
Very
cool.
It wasn't the New York Times crossword puzzle, but I mean, even still, it's a pretty big deal.
Pretty big deal.
Also, I'll go into this a little bit more later in the program, but we've had reports of scammers in our YouTube comments, and we should say we will never, ever, 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 ever ask you for money to be a guest on the show. That does not happen. We never send anybody equipment. We never send any money. We don't issue any type of contracts. We don't do any of that. If we will never contact you, Emma or I or Matt or Bradley or no one associated with the show will ever ask you for money via DM or email or in comments or anything. The only time we ask for anything is memberships, and we will do that on the program.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to make that absolutely clear. Or I guess, like selling merch. But if the merch is particularly expensive or, then it's not our merch. So I just want to make that clear up front, because we've had reports of scammers in our YouTube comments, and apparently that goes around. Other shows have had that too. So just be clear. Mention this. The Republicans are just much better at making a stink out of stuff. Now, I think when Donald Trump was in office, there were so many things that were happening that sometimes it was hard, I guess, for the Democrats to, have any one thing stick. But let's be clear. When the entire issue of Donald Trump having these classified documents at Mar-a-Lago came up, the first thing that all of us were saying was, what an idiot. Why didn't he just give them back when they asked for them? And then what an idiot. Why were they pretending that they gave them all back and then holding them back? They gave them the, limited hangout type of thing. Yeah, here's 20 documents. And they still had, hundreds in boxes. And that looked suspicious.
Yeah,
and
it looks like
somebody's investigating.
I mean, if you want all the documents, say
yeah.
100% of them.
I gotta
And
get
just to
something
be clear,
in return.
every document that Joe Biden had in his office or in his home or whatnot, we only know about because Biden's lawyers found them and then returned them immediately to the archivists before the archivists even were aware that they were missing. Here is Representative James Comer, however, Republican from Kentucky, on with Jake Tapper on Sunday.
So let's go there because you're talking about the Trump documents. Former President Trump is under an investigation for his own classified documents. There are about 20 in the case of Biden. For Trump, there are more than 300 classified documents at Mar-a-Lago. A big difference here, just on the facts, Trump did not fully comply with the subpoena. His lawyers falsely told investigators that they turned everything in. Take a listen to what you told CNN about this situation last November.
I don't know much about that. That's not something that we've requested information just to see what was going on because I don't know what documents were at Mar-a-Lago. So, that's something we're just waiting to see what comes out on that.
But is it fair to say that investigation won't be a priority?
That will not be a priority.
So what do you say to viewers who don't understand why President Biden's documents seem like a big priority for you, but President Trump, who took hundreds more documents, did not comply with the subpoena, did not reach out to the National Archives or the Justice Department to say, hey, we found these documents. It's not a priority. Do you only care about classified documents being mishandled when Democrats do the mishandling?
Absolutely not. Look, we still don't know what type of documents President Trump had. That's one of the questions we've asked National Archives. Just because Joe Biden's lawyers said they turned over 5 documents doesn't mean they just turned over 5 documents. They could have turned over 500 documents. I'm sorry, but I don't have a lot of confidence in President Biden's personal lawyers. At the end of the day, the National Archives implied to us at former Chairman Maloney's request and told us that the National Archives was working with the Trump administration during the transition. That's the last communication we had with whether or not the archives had worked with Trump on removal of all the documents from the White House. So we don't know exactly what Trump has versus what Biden has. At the end of the day, my biggest concern isn't the classified documents, to be honest with you. My concern is how there's such a discrepancy in how former President Trump was treated by raiding Mar-a-Lago, by getting the security cameras, by taking pictures of documents on the floor, by going through Melania's closet versus Joe Biden.
All right, can you pause it? I have an easy way to explain the discrepancy because Biden voluntarily returned them. And Trump had to do so kicking and screaming to the point where they had to execute a search warrant on his home. That's the discrepancy.
It's even greater than that because it's not even that he voluntarily gave them. Like they didn't even know that he had them. He brought them in. Like it was like proactively, voluntarily.
Bold to go like, I don't care about the principle here. I'm concerned about the hypocrisy.
Let's. Is there any more?
Sorry.
All right.
Trump was treated by raiding Mar-a-Lago, by getting the security cameras, by taking pictures of documents on the floor, by going through Melania's closet. Versus Joe Biden, they're like, okay, your personal lawyers who don't have security clearance, they can go through, they can just keep looking and determine whatever's there. That's not equal treatment, and we're very concerned and there's a lack of trust here at
Right.
the Department of Justice by House Republicans. That's the outrage.
So I get that, but there's a big difference in how President Biden and his team reacted and how President Trump and his
Equal
team
rights.
reacted. The FBI searched Mar-a-Lago because Trump, for more than a year, refused to turn over documents to the National Archives and the Justice Department, which was trying to get them back into secure hands. Trump and his lawyers lied about it. Trump lied about not having classified documents, did not keep them in a secure location, did not comply with a subpoena, but said he had. And that search warrant, which Trump forced out into the open through his legal machinations, that cited laws that Trump might have violated, including the Espionage Act.
It's my understanding that President Trump did let the National Archives go through on numerous occasions, Mar-a-Lago looking at the documents. What my understanding is, and again, we don't know because we haven't been briefed, was that President Trump was arguing with National Archives over what is classified and what is not. As we've heard the president say before, the president has the authority to declassify documents. Now, the question is whether or not the president actually declassified the documents. The vice president does not have the authority to declassify.
Actually, the vice president does have.
There's a big difference.
The vice president does. I'm not saying
we don't. The
vice president does have that authority.
I disagree that the vice president does.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Well, there it is. But the point is, the Republicans are just so much better at this. I mean, and good for Jake Tapper, who I think, has decided CNN, if he's going to go out at CNN because of everything that they're doing over there, he's going to go out with some measure of integrity. So good for him. But the Republicans are just much better at having absolutely no shame about these things. And now you see like people like, Schiff and the others on the intel, they're running for president. And so they've got to make it look like we're going to take this as seriously as the Trump thing. When had Donald Trump just given over these documents the first or second or third or fourth or fifth time that the archivists and the FBI asked him for the documents, we would have never even heard the story. I'm convinced we would have never even heard of it.
Yeah, I have a dream that all presidents will be treated equal by the Justice Department.
They were trying to get out ahead of it. I mean, that was the reason that the Biden administration did it, and I think it's the right move. In like they undercut any attempts at a cover-up narrative. So Republicans will kick and scream, but this isn't. Classified documents aren't moving the needle on either side. People who already hate Trump are going to use the classified documents to justify the fact that he's a crook, and that's the case. People that already hate Biden will scream hypocrisy, and that will be the end of it. And that's just, that's it. That's it for this story.
All right. We got a couple of sponsors before we bring on David Enrich. One of our sponsors today, Henson Shaving. I forgot my razor, too. But Henson Shaving is a family-owned aerospace parts manufacturer that has made parts for the International Space Station. They did it for the Mars rover, and now they're bringing precision engineering to your shaving experience. These razors are super cool. I have the aluminum one, and I just ordered, I guess they call it the AL13, maybe it is? I can't remember. But I just ordered an all-black one.
Ooh.
It looks super cool. And, for a long time, I used, disposable razors, and then I used a razor with disposable cartridges. And now, obviously, I'm not shaving as much. It's really basically just this area here. And so I wanted a razor I didn't have to spend a ton of money on once I got it. Like, I have it, and that's it. I don't have to get all the disposable stuff. And this razor is amazing. Apparently, the discomfort that men and women have with shaving with disposable razors is because the blades extend too far. It's not that they're not sharp enough. The blade like wobbles on your face. And apparently, like the longer the board, the more wobble. And then you get more cuts, you get more nicks. You don't have the same amount of control. So a bad shave turns out not to be a blade problem. It's an extension problem. But Henson uses aerospace grade CNC machines, computerized, I guess, the machines that make metal razors that extend just 0.0013 inches, less than the thickness of a human hair. which means a secure and stable blade with a vibration-free shave. And it gets better. The razor has like built-in channels to excavate hair, so you don't have to bang it on the side of your sink or use your thumb, for gosh sakes. Henson Shaving wants to also be the best razor, not the best razor business, which means you buy it once and you're done. There's no plastic, there's no subscriptions, there's no proprietary blades, no planned obsolescence. The Henson razor works with standard dual-edged blades that give you that old school straight razor shave with the benefits of new school technology. Once you own a Henson razor, it's only about $3 to $5 per year to replace the blades. They got a couple of different versions. I got the AL13, but they have one that's, if I was ever going to shave the beard off or go back to daily shaving, I might switch to the AL13M, which is a little bit more aggressive. But either way, they're giving the Majority Report audience a 2-year supply of blades for free. So just go to hensonshaving.com/majority. That's Henson, HENSON, shaving.com/majority. Add a razor and 100 pack of blades to your cart, then enter the code majority to get the blades for free. The link is in the description. If this is a once and done situation, really great, a great shave. Check it out. Another one of our sponsors today, Hold On Bags. I have gone now fully Hold On bagified. I don't know how to say that. Well,
you're holding on to Hold On bags.
Well done. Yeah, that's well done.
Hey,
I put them in my thing, but that's it. All right, here's the point. We need a lot more, sort of like governmental action when it comes to like
plastic and bags.
All it takes is a slight change. Oh, did I get?
Yep, you're back now.
A little bit of
okay.
a flip.
All it takes is a slight change. Hold On trash and kitchen bags are heavy-duty, plant-based, non-toxic, and 100% home compostable, which means that they break down in weeks, not in decades. And you do this without filling up your landfills or polluting our oceans. They have a zip seal kitchen bag that come in sandwich or gallon sizes to fit all your needs. Put a sandwich in there, or carrots when you send a kid to school, or cucumbers, or crayons. I use their smaller bags for my cat poop, not my personal cat poop, the poop that comes out of my cats. And now I've made a big switch to the kitchen bags as well. And even if you're not putting it into compost, the point is within a couple of weeks, you're not going to have, this plastic's not going to end up in the ocean. Single-use plastic. And if you ask most experts this, it is the worst kind of plastic. At every stage, production, in disposal, and decomposition, plastic bags are doing harm to the earth. They are wreaking havoc on the ocean. Hold On trash and kitchen bags meet the highest standards of compostability. They break down again in weeks, not in centuries, and they are made from non-toxic ingredients and plant-based renewables. To shop plant-based bags and replace single-use plastic all over your home, visit holdonbags.com/majority or enter majority at checkout to save 20% off your order. Sustainability has never been more simple. That's holdonbags.com/majority or enter majority to receive 20% off your order. Small things can lead to lasting change if we stop and we say, hold on. And lastly, final sponsor of the day. We mentioned the scam that is going on in our YouTube chat. Scammers are always looking for new ways to scam you, and in particular, get your credit card numbers, get your identity, can wreak havoc on your life, on your financial situation, on your life. One of the reasons why I'm excited about this sponsor, Aura, is that it protects you in about 5 different ways. Aura is an easy-to-use app. Like I say, includes everything you need to stay safe online. It protects you from scammers and hackers, allows you to scan the dark web. This is where, hackers and whatnot sell stolen information. It looks for your emails, it looks for your passwords and your social security numbers, and it alerts you fast if you find anything. I used to rent cars more. I haven't rented a car in a long time, but back in the day, I still had I had an account with, it was Hertz. And apparently there's a data leak. And it let me know I got to change my password associated with that email. Or it helps you fight back against those annoying websites that make your personal information public by automatically requesting removal of your info. This helps reduce robocalls, junk mail, and is important for OPSEC. Or it gives you near real-time alerts on suspicious credit inquiries, like if someone's opening, getting a loan or getting a car loan or opening a bank account. I got one of these when I opened up my account for Mila. It was me, but I was happy to get it. It made me know that they're on top of it. Their VPN allows you to stay anonymous online by keeping your browsing history and your personal information safe and encrypted. And they protect your devices from viruses, malware, spyware, and more, so the bad guys can't break in. And Aura even helps you manage what your kids can do on their devices. You can restrict specific apps. You can set screen time limits, set focus times to ensure your child is doing their homework instead of binging on YouTube. And they have a passwords manager that lets you store and access your online passwords securely and conveniently. And maybe you have an app that does one of those things. Aura does it all. Let Aura do the hard work of keeping you safe online. If you sign up right now, Aura will give you a 2-week free trial with my link. You're going to be shocked at how much of your private information Aura may find exposed in those 2 weeks. Go to aura.com/majority to start your free trial. That's aura.com/majority. Start your free trial. That will be linked in the description of the podcast, the YouTube, and at majority.fm. I'm going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll be talking to David Enrich, New York Times investigation editor, on his book, Servants of the Damned, Giant Law Firms, Trump, and the Corruption of Justice. We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland on the Majority Report. Joining us, David Enrich. He's the business investigations editor at the New York Times, author of Servants of the Damned, Giant Law Firms, Donald Trump, and the Corruption of Justice. David, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
I want to ask you what first led you to write this book, but I have to say, for years, in fact, in 2011, Fran Lebowitz was on the program, and I asked her why she thought there was an ascent of money as a value in our country. And she said something that made my jaw drop, because it is the one thing I remember as a child, and that was when lawyers got the opportunity to advertise. And she pegged it on that, and I have very little memory of as a child, but I do remember the day that lawyers were allowed to advertise, because it was like somebody died in my family. I was raised by lawyers, and the idea that lawyers would advertise was like sacrilege. It was like literally like priests putting ads out, as far as my father was concerned. And you cite that as one of the two biggest sort of, I guess, catalysts for the legal profession in many respects. I mean, you're writing about one particular firm going off the rails here. With that said, before you get to the second one, just back up and tell us how that's manifested itself. what's changed in the legal profession from your perspective?
Well, the legal profession, as you kind of alluded to, was long, it considered itself to be centered on these notions of the pursuit of fairness, honesty, truth, and justice. And that is, I think, to a large extent been replaced by this idea of trying to win at all costs. And that is driven in part by a desire to make money. It's in part an ambition to achieve power. But it's manifested itself in a lot of ways. And I think the biggest is the rise of these mega global law firms that until a few decades ago really just didn't exist. And law firms, to the extent that they existed at all, were really clusters of lawyers in one city or one region of the country that were focused on serving companies or individuals in those regions of the country. And today, and this is not something that just happened, this has been an evolution over the past few decades, but today, these giant law firms span the globe. They have thousands and thousands of lawyers and dozens of offices all over the world. And that, just from a simple business standpoint, that really changes their mandates. And they need to keep growing, keep attracting new clients, keep taking on new cases in order to be able to keep affording to hire new lawyers. And it's kind of a vicious cycle that's been spinning now for several decades. And one result is that law firms have become much more focused on attracting new clients and devising increasingly aggressive legal strategies as part of the efforts to woo these new clients. And I think it's led the legal profession, as it becomes the legal industry, to really abandon a lot of the cultural constraints that characterized them over the preceding 150 years.
Although there are some notable exceptions, right? Like Sullivan and Cromwell was instrumental in some of the, United States intelligence services, most like nefarious coup plots in South America, for example. I mean, in many ways, that they were ahead of their time by being a mega law firm that was so tied to corporate interests that it was almost inextricable.
Yeah, that's totally a fair point. And look, I mean, it's not like prior to allowing lawyers to advertise or any of these other recent forces that I look at in the book, that these law firms were, or the lawyers that worked for them were entirely doing kind of noble, great things. But I think that as a general rule, the practice of law in the United States, as it comes to representing big companies, has changed in some really radical ways. And to me, the notion of lawyers now being allowed to advertise, and again, this stems, for people who are not experts in this stems from a kind of long forgotten Supreme Court ruling in the late 1970s. But the kind of the most obvious sign of that is that every time you drive down a highway, you see billboards for lawyers advertising their services. But to me, the bigger problem, with the benefit of hindsight with that decision, was not so much the kind of weird ads you see everywhere for lawyers. It's that lawyers are now allowed to promote themselves and to seek out new clients and new business. And that's something that really, as a general rule, had not been happening prior to the Bates v. Arizona Supreme Court decision in the 70s. And it meant that lawyers and law firms became much more aggressive at devising these kind of envelope pushing legal strategies that they could use to attract new clients. And I think that's been a real force for ill in the legal profession and therefore in the corporate world as well.
My sense was that, and again, maybe this was, a function of my own personal experience, but it's an on-balance thing, hashtag not all lawyers. But there was a sense that lawyers were officers of the court, that they were almost like an adjunct to the, like our official sort of structure of our society and our democracy. Like they were sort of, they considered themselves to have a higher responsibility. That's why you had, a bar association with ethics that had to be struck down by the Supreme Court before they could advertise. And your book focuses on Jones Day. Before they were Jones Day, in an earlier iteration in Cleveland, you've given a good example of like how they responded. I can't remember what the case was now,
The gas company, the explosions, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Walk us through that just to give us a sense of like the sort of the before and after shots.
Well, just to set this up a tiny bit, like part of as I started working on this book several years ago, and people kept telling me kind of skeptically, nobody's going to be surprised that big law firms do nasty things on behalf of their clients. Of course, that's what they're going to do, and of course, they're going to win at all costs. That's almost their duty to clients. And I kind of had that in the back of my mind as I started researching the history of Jones Day. And one of the examples I came across, I thought was a really strong kind of rebuttal to that point. And basically what happened is that in 1944 in Cleveland, a big gas company had built a set of tanks to hold liquid natural gas. And two of those tanks exploded. It basically leveled an entire neighborhood in Cleveland. A lot of people died, many more were injured. There was a ton of property that was destroyed. And so the gas company, the day of the explosion, it was a Friday, went to their lawyers at Jones Day and said, look, this just happened. You need to provide us very quickly with some legal advice on how to handle this, because we're obviously going to be flooded with litigation. And Jones Day spent the weekend basically researching the case law and kind of coming up with some options to propose to the gas company. And the obvious option was what companies, I think, normally would do in a situation like this. Certainly today they would normally do. And that's basically fight tooth and nail to avoid paying damages to any of the people whose property was harmed or who were injured themselves. You can do that by kind of protracted legal strategies to kind of kick the can down the road. You can place the blame on other people, like the steel company that had helped build these gas tanks, things like that. You can kind of discount the amount of damages that people suffered, things like that. Jones Day, though, so basically said that that's one option. Here's another option, which is what we recommend. If you want to remain in Cleveland as a good corporate citizen, you should just admit that you're responsible for this huge tragedy that just occurred, and you should accept responsibility and offer to pay people. And so the explosion took place on a Friday. That Monday, the gas company ran an ad in the local newspaper that said, come to our offices, present evidence that you were harmed or your property was harmed, and we will pay you on the spot. And so Jones Day set up on the ground floor of the gas company's headquarters desks and basically manned those desks, and on the spot cut something like, in today's dollars, I think it's more than $100 million in checks to people right then and there. And this is held up, and over the decade, the gas company remains in Cleveland. It is its efforts to kind of make people whole are widely regarded as having been the right thing to do. Its reputation was intact, and it just stands in complete contrast to the way that Jones Day these days will go to the ends of the earth, basically, to defend clients that are accused of doing things that have had similar negative consequences, whether it's helping opioid companies or gun manufacturers or cigarette companies, and on and on. Jones Day is renowned these days for being super aggressive in the courtroom, doing everything it can to undercut witnesses, undercut plaintiffs. And again, that's within their rights as a law firm to do it. But the notion that that is simply the only way to practice law and only way to serve a client well is really belied by Jones Day's own history. And so that example really stood out to me as a powerful example of the way things could be if lawyers and law firms and their clients were incentivized to act in a certain way.
And we should also say, and this is, I think, really important to articulate, the Sixth Amendment says that defendants are guaranteed the right of counsel in criminal cases. And you write about this. There has been an attempt, and we see this all the time in the justifications, that even defendants are should have a right to representation. But this is not. That is in a criminal case, not there. And it's not just that
ExxonMobil.
It's not that they don't have a right. It's that there is no. They have sort of melded this constitutional provision that is very important to a just and free society, and they've melded it into a justification of like, we can represent the worst people doing the worst things, that as long as it's, they're a defendant, doesn't matter whether it's a criminal or a civil proceeding. And it allows them, it's basically for them a get out of jail free card for their conscience.
Yeah, and this has been one of the main points that Jones Day and other big law firms have used to attack my book, which is that they're simply upholding the proud American tradition of everyone gets a lawyer no matter what. And that's, of course, not the tradition. As you said, it's the Sixth Amendment says people accused of crimes are entitled to counsel, which, by the way, they often don't get very good counsel because so many lawyers are recruited into these giant corporate law firms with the huge salaries. And it means that there are many fewer really skilled defense lawyers available to poor people and people of color than there otherwise would be. And to me, it's even if you stipulate that anyone, including any corporation that's accused of any wrongdoing in any setting, civil or criminal, is entitled to legal counsel, that still doesn't cover a huge amount of what big corporate law firms today are doing, which is helping clients and super wealthy individuals do things like avoid taxes, avoid government scrutiny, weaken federal regulations, state regulations, and in some cases, and I go through this in the book, and intimidating local officials in random towns all over the country into not properly regulating tobacco, things like that. And these are services to which no one, under even the most expansive interpretation of the Sixth Amendment or other provisions of the Constitution, no one's entitled to these. And it's not to say you shouldn't be allowed to get them, but the notion that lawyers and law firms should be immune from scrutiny and criticism for helping companies avoid taxes or move money around secretly, and that's just nonsense.
Well, it's the priest-like quality that Sam kind of alluded to earlier, and the almost religious way that one views their profession, just copy and paste it onto a corporate money-making model that, I mean, doesn't necessarily jive with their high opinion of themselves, frankly.
Yeah, it's become a very convenient and kind of all-purpose smokescreen that big law firms use to justify all sorts of work that they really, and I think, don't have a particularly strong moral or ethical justification for doing, but that is very, very lucrative and allows them to continue expanding, continue hiring more lawyers, and continue recruiting additional clients. And I think the one caveat to this is that a lot of these big law firms make the point, which is true, that they have really robust pro bono practices, that the fact that they're making so much money representing big bad corporate clients allows them to do things that truly are good for the world. And Jones Day is a good example of this. They have poured a tremendous amount of money into doing some really, I think, noble work on the US-Mexico border, helping undocumented migrants who are in desperate need of legal representation. But so the combination of everyone deserves a lawyer and look at the good things we're doing with our huge profits have really, the legal industry has been very adept at using those two forces to insulate themselves from any substantive criticism and to attack anyone who questions the work that they're doing.
So it's not, and to be clear, it's not just, although in my mind that is almost sufficient. Like the idea that they're representing some of the most reprehensible corporations and actions that one could imagine. It's also the nature of their tactics that they're using. That is, again, this gets into just sort of like their size and the amount of money that they're making. You mentioned that in Marion, Mass, some intimidation tactics. Talk about that. I want to go through some of these tactics that you mentioned.
Yeah, sure. So Marion, Massachusetts is a small community right near Cape Cod. And basically their Board of Health came up with the idea, this is several years ago, of imposing restrictions on the sale of flavored tobacco products, whether that's like candy flavored or fruit flavored or including menthol flavored cigarettes. And to be clear, they were not proposing banning the consumption of these products or smoking of these products. They proposed restricting the sale inside this little town. And again, there were maybe 2 or 3 places in the town that even sold these things. So it was not that big a deal. R.J. Reynolds.
And supposedly to protect the kids. I'm sorry, being suspicious. Yeah, but that's what it was.
Well, right. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of research, as I'm sure you know, that shows that flavored tobacco products are and they end up being much more addictive and much more palatable, especially to young people's taste buds. And so it's been an effort by the industry to hook people at a time when traditional tobacco products, whether it's smoking or chewing tobacco, have largely fallen out of favor. And the people on the Board of Health included a pediatric oncologist who had firsthand experience of seeing what cigarette smoking and tobacco use do to young people. In any case, they came up with this idea. It's a small town. No one really thought much would happen here. But R.J. Reynolds, which since the 1980s has been one of Jones Day's biggest clients, they got wind of this. And so a top Jones Day lawyer, Noel Francisco, who would go on to become a top figure in the Trump administration's Justice Department, he wrote a letter to town officials in Marion, which was, written on this fancy Jones Day stationery that basically said, if you go through with this proposal and enact this proposal, we are going to sue you. And the arguments that Francisco outlined in his letter, according to a bunch of legal experts, independent legal experts that I've spoken to, were just garbage. And I think that the claim that they're garbage has been validated by various subsequent court rulings on, going all the way up to the Supreme Court. But the fact of the matter is, when you're a small town and you receive a letter from a giant corporate law firm, that lists its 40 some offices around the world in the letter, and it's a threatening letter. And it made the town kind of stop and think about what they were doing. And the town essentially tied itself in a knot, worried that if they were to proceed with this, they would spend years and possibly millions of dollars that they didn't really have litigating this with R.J. Reynolds. And they basically got cold feet and gave up. The town official who had been kind of the leading advocate of this was so discouraged by, this couple years of banging his head against the wall that he kind of resigned from public office and retreated from public life. And, I talked to people at both currently and previously at Jones Day who were involved in this type of threat. And they said this is routine. This is what they do all over the country with municipalities that dare to take on big tobacco. And, more recently, subsequent to Marion going through this, a bunch of courts have ruled that Jones Day and RJR's arguments in this are, in fact, not true, and that the restrictions that Marion and other towns proposed were lawful and constitutional. And so the wind has kind of been taken out of Jones Day sails, but it's to me the tactic there, which is that it takes not very much time or energy or money for a bunch of associates to bang out this kind of weak argument that Francisco signs his name to. They then send these fancy certified mail envelopes, and it is much cheaper for them but just as effective as engaging in litigation. And again, that's something that even if you take the most expansive view of services to which someone is legally or constitutionally obligated to receive, sending threatening letters to small town officials on behalf of a client does not fall under that rubric. And again, that's Jones Day's basic argument in their defense here, is that this is an example of a service we provide because all clients deserve representation. And that's a value judgment they're making. And to me, I think it's a really powerful example of a big, well-financed corporate interest being able to kind of steamroll smaller officials, or smaller towns and their officials, even when the law is simply not on the side of the big company.
And to be clear, they're doing this not because they're concerned about those 2 or 3 bodegas or 7-Elevens in Marion. It's because they're concerned about the precedent being set. Because once Marion
100%.
does it, then Hingham will do it, and then Walpole and Waltham, and then it spreads across Massachusetts, and then it goes.
No, that's exactly right, and that's a strategy that Jones Day really pioneered decades earlier, working for R.J. Reynolds, and that they were concerned that there was starting to be as the science about the dangers of smoking and the addictiveness of tobacco became clear. They were really worried about a flood of lawsuits hitting RJR. And so instead of kind of settling cases and trying to make things go away, they decided that they were just going to pursue this scorched earth policy on behalf of RJR that entailed not just winning in court and casting doubt on science, but really, in some cases, terrorizing plaintiffs and witnesses in a way that would send a message to the plaintiff's bar that you are not going to win easy here. This is going to be something that potentially really damages your client's reputations and incurs enormous costs. And this is kind of the continuation of that strategy, where they are using their virtually unlimited resources as a law firm and as big corporate clients to create a huge, powerful, very publicly visible deterrent to doing anything that might potentially incur the wrath or the litigation of these giant law firms.
And you know, and that dynamic of where they have stretched the Sixth Amendment to the Constitution, the Sixth Amendment to the Constitution, where if you're in a criminal trial, you are constitutionally required to have defense. To we're defending our client who is not a defendant in a case at all when we send a letter threatening a town from protecting its kids from being poisoned by our client. Like, it's just, it is a way of obscuring a decision they're making. And they have every right to make that decision. You know, Katyal has every right to go and argue on behalf of Nestle using slave labor if he wants, Neil Katyal. But that, you don't get to be a good person in the way that people judge you. I mean, that honestly, I mean, it sounds sort of like silly, but they walk around as if there's a certain righteousness and piousness in what they're doing. And in fact, no, it's just an opportunity for them to make money.
And I think another element of this is that the notion that everyone gets this legal, or is entitled to this legal representation, is it kind of presupposes that law firms are passively sitting there, and then a client comes knocking on the door saying, hey, we're under attack from the government or from a small town or something like that. Will you please help us defend ourselves? Which, you know, again, I think there are problems with that, but that's at least somewhat more justifiable. In fact, what's happening most of the time is that big law firms, and I'm not trying to pick on Jones Day, they're, you know, just doing the same thing that many other firms do as well. They are actively out there soliciting clients, and they're pursuing and devising and then implementing really hard-nosed, aggressive, kind of envelope-pushing legal strategies. And then they're using those on behalf of a client, and then they're using their success with that one client to go out and kind of trawl for additional clients and using the same strategy. So in many ways, these law firms are really, they become marketers of their own super aggressive legal strategies and they tend to be effective. And to me, that, and going back to this, the end of the ban on attorney advertising, this is kind of the logical extension of that, because in the good old days, and I say that somewhat facetiously, but back before the Supreme Court decision in Bates v. Arizona, you could not go and solicit clients by, you know, talking about your successes in other case. That was regarded as inappropriate, and you were really supposed to sit there and wait for clients to come to you. And that notion, it's so antiquated at this point that it's kind of hard to believe that once existed, but that is the way it worked. It created, there was much less of an incentive for a law firm like Jones Day to go cook up a super aggressive legal strategy that they were then going to use to recruit more clients. It's just not the way that phenomenon did not exist.
I spend a couple of times a year going and interviewing plaintiff attorneys who, you know, again, there's a significant percentage of them who are anti-corporate and who come out of the civil rights profession. And then there's another, you know, significant portion of them that innovate, like, I came up with 888, you know, like that's the, but nevertheless, I hear a little about what these corporations do in terms of their defense. Talk about the Texas two-step strategy that these corporations use when they are trying to avoid what the lawyers used to help corporations avoid liability for products that they either knew when they were developing were problematic, or knew once they had released them were problematic, and they continue to sell on and on.
So this is actually kind of what I was referring to vaguely when I said that, you know, Jones Day cooks up a very aggressive legal strategy, and then when it succeeds a little bit, they start marketing it all over the country to other big companies. That, as far as I can tell, is exactly what happened with the Texas two-step. And the Texas two-step basically refers to, you know, under Texas law, if you're a company that, like Johnson & Johnson, for example, that is facing huge liability from from products you created, like baby powder with talc that allegedly contains carcinogens, you can basically create a separate company in Texas, move all of your liabilities from, in this case, talc, into that separate new company in Texas, have that company immediately declare bankruptcy, and you, Johnson & Johnson, have basically wiped your hands of the responsibility for this product you were selling for many years that has allegedly caused these huge damages to thousands and thousands of people. The bankrupt entity in Texas now it has to go through the Chapter 11 process, and that can take months. In fact, it can take years, even decades. And so Johnson & Johnson is kind of sitting pretty. In this case, it put a couple $2 billion into this newly created, now bankrupt company, which is, by I think most accounts, not nearly enough to cover even a fraction of the claims that the company was facing from people who had been harmed or allegedly harmed by the talc products. But those people are now waiting in line probably for years, and they're probably going to end up accepting pennies on the dollar to settle their claims, because that is superior to having to wait for many years to get their claims adjudicated kind of through the bankruptcy process. And this is a strategy that Jones Day basically pioneered on behalf of the Koch brothers in a separate case. And when that worked very effectively, they started deploying it and rolling it out to other companies, including J&J. And this is, one of the interesting things about this is that this strategy has very quickly become controversial and has generated a good bit of publicity, at least in the business world, and negative publicity, I should say. And so this is, to me, a rare example of a law firm and a client really maybe taking things a step and a half too far and doing what they want to avoid, which is, the last thing Jones Day wants, or any other law firm wants, is to be in the headlines for devising a legal strategy that is leaving the families of cancer victims empty-handed. And, another thing I will just say for fairness is that, the plaintiff's bar was not the focus of my book. It has not been the focus of my research, but talking to a lot of lawyers out there, there are plenty of amazing plaintiffs lawyers who do great work, but there also are plenty of plaintiffs lawyers and big plaintiffs law firms that are also very aggressive and are also deploying these kind of envelope pushing strategies on behalf of clients. And yes, they're representing people who have allegedly been harmed by big companies, but those lawyers are also very much looking out for themselves and are collecting, really enriching themselves. And I think the incentive structure is quite a bit different and probably more aligned with the public interest than what these lawyers at big corporate firms are doing. But I don't want to completely gloss over the aggression and at times kind of, envelope pushing nature of what the plaintiff side is doing in these cases too.
Yes, I mean, I agree with that, and that's trying to capture that with the innovation of 888 or I advertise in this. But again, I think ultimately the point is, how does that align with the public interest at the end of the day? I think there is, certainly a case to be made that people are motivated by something different. But at the end of the day, I would rather somebody who's interested in, is completely self-motivated and is inhibiting corporations from poisoning other people than somebody who is, thinks that there's some higher principle associated with protecting, Abbott Labs from suffering any, corporate consequences. Let's talk about that. I think it was the Abbott Labs case that they basically told witnesses to lie.
Yeah, and I wouldn't put it in quite such strong terms, but you're definitely in the right direction. And they say Abbott Labs is, among other things, the leading manufacturer in the U.S. of powdered infant formula. And for years, there's been this very pronounced pattern supported by lots of scientific research that shows that the powdered infant formula on rare occasions contains a type of bacteria that when consumed by a newborn baby it causes a type of meningitis that can kill the baby or leave the baby with permanently and very severely brain damaged. And there's been a good bit of litigation in this area brought by families of babies who either died or were brain damaged. And Jones Day has for a long time been Abbott's law firm. And I focused in particular on a case in Iowa where a poor family had twins The boy twin, James, did not consume powdered formula. The little girl, Janine, did. Janine came down with meningitis, and it didn't kill her, but it left her so completely incapacitated that she'll never be able to walk, talk, even sit up or swallow. And so she's just terribly brain damaged. The family has incurred these huge medical expenses trying to just make a life for themselves, essentially. And so they sued Abbott. And Abbott had a very kind of well-oiled, well-rehearsed playbook for these types of cases. It involved everything from casting blame elsewhere, including onto the family, the water supply in the house, things like that, but also to really interfering with the ability of the plaintiffs and their lawyers to build a case. And so what they did in this case, according to the federal judge who presided over the case, was they snowed the plaintiffs with just huge, totally unwieldy amounts of evidence that they wanted to introduce at trial. Like, we're talking so much evidence that the judge's chambers were filled basically from floor to ceiling with boxes of evidence. He said it was the most evidence he'd ever seen anyone try to introduce in the trial. And it was basically designed to make the plaintiffs' lawyers, who were, just a small town law firm, basically wade through this totally unwieldy amount of evidence. And the second thing they did, when the plaintiffs' lawyers were deposing Abbott employees, this is before the trial even starts, Jones Day had a lawyer sit in on these depositions, and she basically interfered with the deposition. She would interrupt every couple of minutes, and not just to voice objections, but often to essentially coach the witness. And that's not according to me, that's according, again, to the federal judge who presided over this case. And so they would basically stop the questioning and say, oh, don't you mean to answer it this way? Don't you mean to answer it that way? And in addition to being extremely disruptive and I think complicating the efforts of the plaintiffs to extract information from these witnesses, according to the judge, it violated the federal rules of trial procedure that are supposed to govern the conduct of lawyers in these cases. And so this stuck out to me because it was an example of Jones Day not just representing a big, powerful client that has allegedly done something that's harmed a lot of kids and a lot of families, but also, and not just deploying kind of novel legal strategies to try and cast doubt on what actually happened. But in this case, they were actually, according to the judge, violating the rules. And that is clearly not a service to which anyone is entitled. And Jones Day, again, in this case, falls back on the notion that Abbott is a client. They're a longtime client. They are accused of wrongdoing. Ergo, they deserve robust legal representation. Well, the representation that Jones Day was providing, at least according to this federal judge, was beyond the pale. And the judge told me in an interview that it was the worst by a factor of 10. The conduct was the worst by a factor of 10 he had ever seen in his, I think, 12 or 14 years on the federal bench.
You got Trump in the title, and certainly Jones Day has been intimately involved in different parts in the Trump administration. Don McGahn, who also was Tom DeLay's lawyer, like a longtime Republican operative lawyer, was involved in that. And folks can check out the book to read more about that dynamic. But I'm curious from a structural standpoint, like, what is your sense? And I know this may be, beyond your portfolio in writing the book, but having spent this much time reporting on some of the more egregious and problematic players in the law field, and are ones who are indicative of that dynamic, what can be done? Like, structurally speaking, I mean, I felt like law schools as an institution have failed miserably to address any of this. And part of the problem is too, is just like they're pumping out more lawyers. There's only so many lawyers that we need, and they're pumping out a lot of lawyers. And, the old joke is a guy graduates law school, goes to his old hometown because there's no lawyers there, puts up his plaque, and he gets no business until another lawyer moves into town. I'm not that cynical about lawyers, but there needs to be some type of reform, and it doesn't appear to be enough for the ABA or the Bar Association. Like, the ethics within the Bar Association they don't seem to be as aggressive as they used to be about these things.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what role, if any, there is for the bar associations, much less the government, in restricting how lawyers act. And to me, among, in addition to just like normal human beings who I hope will read the book, I also the kind of two of the main groups that I think could benefit from reading this are, one is the media, which has really just like not done a good job, with plenty of exceptions, has not done a good job of covering these giant law firms like they would any other industry. I mean, each of these big law firms is a multi-billion-dollar institution, and yet I think in part because the legal industry has been really good at kind of protecting itself in this cocoon of everyone deserves legal representation. Anyone who questions that is kind of un-American. I think they have largely avoided media scrutiny, and I think that should change. The second big group.
Let me just before you get to the second one.
Sure.
To the extent that we've had any type of like cohesive and extended sort of like pushback on lawyers, that I feel like, even started back like in the days like LA Law and this and that, has been all around the plaintiff side, right? Like, like we like had extended, we watched the Republicans talk about tort reform over and over again. Yep. We hear people, basically spread the sort of fabrication and sort of ostentatious sort of more or less lie about like, the whole hot coffee case. When you actually dig into that case, it's horrific what happened to that old woman, and why McDonald's was doing it. It all has been on the plaintiff side, which is invariably, more often than not, I mean, either a citizen or a group of citizens or consumers or whatnot who are protecting their rights from corporations. The defense side has like escaped any scrutiny. The plaintiff side has gotten all of it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And I think one of the kind of insidious reasons for that is that, and I don't mean to say this is deliberate, but I think it's the reality, is that a lot of journalists, myself included over the years, have some of our best sources are partners at big corporate law firms, and they provide a ton of really useful information. And that creates an incentive, whether it's conscious or subconscious, to be nice to your sources and to slightly pull your punches, I think, at times. And I've found myself over the years, and that's part of the reason I wanted to write this book in the first place, is that I had noticed this pattern, I've been covering business and finance for like 20 plus years at this point. And I've seen myself do that at times, like not deliberately, but it's kind of the natural effect that you have a good source somewhere. You are not super eager to go attack that good source or that source's employer or that source's industry. And I think that is something, the combination of that and this notion that everyone deserves a lawyer, of course, this is what lawyers do. Why would you even bother questioning this? Because this is the way the world works. Those two forces have made the media, I think, again, with many exceptions, very kind of complacent about this industry. And, the mainstream media covers big banks really aggressively, as they should. They cover, big consumer products companies aggressively, airlines aggressively. And law firms, to me, deserve the same level of rigorous professional media scrutiny as any other major industry does. And I think that would provide not just kind of a check on some of the worst behavior in the legal profession, but it would also, I think, do a lot to culturally change the attitudes that people have. And again, that I'll be real fast. And that brings me to the second group of people that I hope, and I know already is reading this book, which is people affiliated with law schools, which, as you mentioned, Sam, there's this very kind of, it's a cycle that spins, right? The law schools host recruiting events for big law firms on campus. They charge students so much money that students are often deep in debt by the time they graduate from law school, and getting a job at a big corporate law firm, which is right off the bat going to pay you well into the six figures, it's the economically rational thing for a young person to do if they are facing huge debts. And it just becomes very hard to escape that cycle. And I think that law schools in general can be doing a much better job of educating their students about different career paths that are available to them, and also about some of the kind of pitfalls that if you are going to go the big law route, that you can try to avoid. And there's no way to avoid them if you're not openly talking about them and really conscious of them. And that's something that law schools, I don't know quite what the incentives are exactly, but they've avoided doing that. And I think part of it is probably that the richer their alumni are, the more money those alumni are going to kick back to the law school, and the more the law schools can boast to prospective students about the great career successes that their graduates have enjoyed. And so it's really this symbiotic relationship between many law schools and many big corporate law firms that I think is it means that some of the best and brightest law students in the country end up putting their talents to work on behalf of giant companies instead of on behalf of the broader public.
Well, it's just another example of student debt being kind of like a disciplinary force for students like that. And just, I was hoping, would you also touch on some of the incentives of people who say don't go directly into a law firm, like the ones you described coming out of law school, say they do go into public service, they become a public defender, or they work for the U.S. Attorney's Office. Many times, especially say like the Southern District, that is a funnel system, or some of the more prestigious districts for corporate law. You talk about big finance or airline industry. Journalists will talk about the revolving door in those contexts, but there's also the revolving door within this context.
Yeah, for sure. And to be honest, I don't really have a good solution to any of this. I don't really know what advice I would give to a young, indebted, soon to be lawyer. And I get the reasoning why you want to go make a bunch of money. And it's not because you're greedy or selfish. It's because you don't want to be deep in debt for the next 20 years, which is totally logical and sensible. And to me, it's not so much about saying, I don't know. I think there are a lot of other careers that a good lawyer can go into, whether it's public service or, even working on the plaintiff side, that can have their own attractions, also their own downsides. But to me, more broadly, it's that people who are going into big law, and I think that's inevitable that a lot of people will, they really need to be conscious about what they're getting themselves into, and also what some of the leverage that they have going into these law firms. And one of the things I learned that was interesting at Jones Day, which prides itself on being this super hierarchical culture where a ton of deference is given to the people at the top, and you're not really supposed to question their authority or their wisdom. And one of the things I noticed is that for some recent graduates who the law firm really wanted to recruit, like including people who had clerked for Supreme Court justices or federal appeals court judges, like one of the things those job candidates could do is basically say they could condition their acceptance of the job offers on not having to work on certain types of cases. So I talked to a few people who just said, I'll join Jones Day, but I will not work on tobacco cases, or I won't work on gun cases, because Jones Day represents big gun manufacturers. And that's something that, as I've recounted those anecdotes to other people in the legal industry, they've been really surprised to hear that someone who you would think the law firm has all the leverage in that equation, but these law firms are so hungry for elite talent right now, and that those applicants really do have some leverage that they can use to kind of control their destiny in ways that I don't think law schools are really educating them on how to do.
Yeah. Well, the law schools need to do a better job, because those guys end up just basically creating capital for those other lawyers down the hall to go and represent some of the worst people and worst corporations that are harming our society. Interesting stuff. David Enrich, business investigations editor at New York Times. The book is Servants of the Damn Giant Law Firms, Donald Trump and the Corruption of Justice. We'll put a link to that in our podcast and YouTube descriptions and at majority.fm. Thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right, folks. Going to take a quick break, head into the fun half of the program. Just a reminder, it's your support that makes this show possible. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, you not only get the free show free of commercials, but you also allow this show to survive and thrive, and you get the fun half. And you get some amenities like on the app, like you can IM us on the app. You can have the deep search on the app function. You can search all of the episodes, 3,000 episodes.
Whoa.
Did you know that?
Yeah.
3,000 episodes?
Yeah, it's unreal.
And the app now updated for iOS and Android. The app is beautiful. Also, AM Quickie,
A beautiful
amquickie.com.
landslide of an app.
Beautiful. The best app.
A sacred landslide.
Head over to amquickie.com. Sign up for the AM Quickie. We got merch. Also, the Discord. And just a reminder, folks, we will never, ever, ever ask you to pay us money to be on the show. We will never, ever invite you to be on the show and say, oh, we need you to send us money so that we can send you video equipment or anything like that. If there's ever a time that we ask you for money and it's not broadcast like this, don't believe it. I'm not talking like, Matt, can you give me that $5 back that I lent you for the candy bar or something? Like, that's not what I'm talking about. So just keep in mind, there are scammers out there in the YouTube chat, and I would imagine other places. I have no idea. But so just be careful with that. Emma, New York Giants? What is it?
Yes. Won a playoff game. Supposed to be, I thought they would be one of the 5 worst teams in the league this year. Most people did. At least 10 worst. They are on to the second round of the playoffs. So I'm probably going to have a beverage in celebration on ESPN. If you want to watch that, youtube.com/ESPN show. And just lots of good stuff to talk about. I mean, this is like a very busy time of the year in the NFL. Giants move on. Has Brady played his last game as a professional football player? Chargers fire Joe Lombardi as a half measure. They should be getting rid of Brandon Staley, going after Sean Payton, but they're too cheap. Among many other storylines, also are the Bills and Bengals in trouble? I placed a wager on the Bengals to win the Super Bowl, so I'm hoping that's not the case. But regardless, youtube.com/ESPN show. It's going to be a fun show. We might start like 15 minutes early because I forgot I'm doing TYT tonight. So busy day for me. youtube.com/ESPN show.
Matt, what's happening in the MLM? Matt Lack Media.
Yeah, tonight I'll be going solo with Robert Squarla. We'll be talking about the original church committee, if this most recent thing is going to be a church committee 2.0. And we also get into some JFK stuff. I get into that stuff because David Griscom is not here. He is covering in his absence in preparation for this Sunday, January 22nd. We are live at the the cutting room. There
cutting
it is.
room in Midtown.
The cutting room in Manhattan.
32nd Street.
And Left Reckoning, Give Them an Argument, This is Revolution, and Sam Seder and Emma Vigland and Bhaskar Sankara will also be there. Get your tickets, folks. There's still a few left, so check those out.
It's going to be fun. My understanding is that doors open at 6.
Yep, and I believe the show starts at 7.
And if you're coming in from out of town, it's right by Penn Station. Not a far walk at all. So very easy to get there.
All right. 646-257-3920 is the number. See you in the fun half.
You are in for it.
All right, folks. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
And the alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflakes says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam, see